Hello and welcome. This little session today, the incredible power of employee recognition, it's brought to you courtesy of the Good Business Charter, all part of their Better Business Fortnight. And if you've not heard about the Good Business Charter in the past, it is a fabulous little organisation that is helping to support organisations across the country to be the best that they can be, to be great places to work, great places to be a customer, to be great with their suppliers, and in doing so, to encourage us all to be able to do more business. So thank you to the Good Business Charter for organising this. So why am I doing this for you today? I'm often reminded of that little saying that when you're up to your neck in alligators, it's difficult to remember that your original intention was to drain the swamp. And I think all of us in business, whether we're leaders or managers, are under enormous pressures. There's tremendous turmoil within the world. There's lots of change, political change, environmental change, cultural change that's going on. It really does feel like we're up to our neck in alligators. But the reason why for bringing this to you is that I do believe that there is a significant opportunity in many businesses to improve the way that we work, to become more efficient and effective, to reduce our costs, to add to our bottom line, and just simply to be better places to work. And my experience is based on some of my own hard challenges over the years, and also based on my experiences of employee recognition over this last 27 years. So the agenda for today is this. I'm going to be talking first of all of what I feel is the challenge, the real responsibility that faces leaders, managers and team leaders today, and that might help to shape your thinking for the future. I'd like to deal also with what I consider to be the 4 myths around employee recognition. These are myths that are perhaps preventing us from doing the best thing. I'll share with you 10 top tips for making your recognition program really work. And for anybody that's watching this live, I will be answering Q&A afterwards. So where does my experience come from this last 27 years? 27 years ago, I started a little project. I called it the Wow Awards. And it's all about customers saying when they've had fantastic customer service. My trigger was that I was incredibly angry about all the negative media in the UK at that time. Programs like Watchdog, Rip Off Britain, Blast Off Britain, what I'd often refer to as sensational journalism. It really wasn't helping Britain to become a better place for customer service or doing business. It was about creating good, newsworthy stories. And I felt that there had to be a better way. Could we identify organisations that were already giving great service, and rather than trying to avoid being the worst, why don't we aspire to be the best? And what happened when I started this program is that customers started to tell us not so much about businesses, but about people. And that's how it grew into a little recognition program that is now being used by organisations around the world. And we receive about 1,000 nominations for these awards every single week. Now, this isn't a pitch for the WOW Awards, but we have learned an awful lot over those 27 years. And before I hang up my laptop and retire and ride off into the sunset, I'd really like to just share with you as much as possible, warts and all, of what we have learned. So here we go. Let's think about first, though, the challenge that you face. And I think when we're involved in a seminar, a webinar, a training program, our brain is in creative mode and we might get lots and lots of ideas. But very often when we get back to our place of work, we're answering the phone, we're dealing with emails, social media, all those other things that are going on every day. And our brain goes from creative mode back into logical mode. And when that happens, all those great ideas that we had in the creative moment suddenly start to get dismissed. You might well start saying, well, what Derek said was good, but. We suffer from something I refer to as rationalizing doing nothing. We start to put blocks in the way. It's almost as though our fears are bigger than our aspirations. So really what I'm challenging you with today is take one idea from today at the very least and just do it. Make it work and then see what benefit you get from that and move on to other ideas that you might have obtained from this session. Because I'm often asked, where do I get great people from for my business? Where can I get great people? How do I attract them? How do I retain them? And my answer, rather simply, is this. I don't think there are any great people out there. All that we really have is the opportunity to employ ordinary people. And through our encouragement and our motivation is to encourage them to do extraordinary things. And when we get the environment right, when the processes are right, when the trust is right, we will attract really fantastic people and retain fantastic people within our businesses. Now, just bear in mind, Gallup did some research around this whole topic of employee engagement, and that's really what we're talking about is, are your people fully engaged? And what they found was that over 17% of people are likely to be actively disengaged. This isn't just passive, these are actively disengaged. These are your corporate terrorists. And that could be costing you as much as 34% of their salary, plus all of the knock-on impacts in terms of poor customer retention, poor brand image and bad reputation. So the cost of poor employee engagement is really, really significant. What can we do about that? So let me share with you first of all a little chart that I came across about 20 years ago and for me had real significance because it captured perfectly a problem that I had suffered around about that time. So this comes from a book called Service Quality. And the authors in this book were looking at two aspects of business. One was what they called service leadership, going from weak to strong. And then they were looking at what impact that might have on discretionary effort of employees. Now, discretionary effort, you could regard it as the extra effort that people are prepared to put into their work above and beyond the bare minimum. Now, in this study, what they found was that people essentially broke down into two quite distinct groups. First of all, they identified what they referred to as the new employees. These are the people that are new to your organisation. And what they found was that with these people, their discretionary effort tended to be pretty good, almost irrespective of how weak or strong the service leadership was. But then they identified a second group, and this group were what they referred to as the experienced employees. These are the people that have been around for a while. And with these people, where the service leadership is weak, that discretionary effort had dropped away. Now, I think that this little chart is absolutely fascinating because it not only shows where people in your organisation might be at any point in time relative to service leadership. And bear in mind, strong service leadership is not about creating a dictatorship. It's about helping people to feel involved. It's about vision, communication, leadership by example, all of those things that we know a good leader should be doing. But what it's showing is that people come in on that green line and they drop to the red line. And the big question for me is, how long might that take? Does it take 6 months or 1 month or 1 week? I think the reality is they could have dropped from that green line to the red line before they even started work, because your reputation is out there. They can tell from the atmosphere of your place of work what it's like to work there. They will hear other people talking, or they will see the way that customers are being treated. Your reputation is already out there, and that discretionary effort may have already dropped away. But what really had significance for me was this. I'd had a lady, I'll call her Betty, that was on that bottom red line. And I'd always felt that there was a problem with Betty. No matter what I tried to do, I couldn't get Betty to be fully engaged and working as well as she possibly might. And up until this point of seeing this chart, I'd always thought that the problem was with Betty. And as soon as I saw this little chart, I realized that the problem wasn't with Betty, the problem was with me. It was my service leadership that was determining how much discretionary effort Betty really gave. So it completely flipped my thinking. And where we really want to get our employees is up into this top band, but on the part of it that's blue, those people are going to drop away. Where we really want to get them is into that bright yellow zone, which I like to refer to as the love zone. And I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but wouldn't it be great if we had people who said, this is a company I really love to work for? And wouldn't that in turn start to trigger customers who say, this is a company that I really like to be a customer for? And what sort of impact might that have on our business in terms of reduced cost, improved customer retention, improved sales, and improved bottom line? The impact could be huge. So what I now realize is that between these two lines, I think there's a pool of opportunity, what I would call a pool of latent effort. Your people are already on that red line. What we want to do is see if we can get them back up to the green line, and that's where we can really make significant gains. How do we get them from the red line up to the green line? And I think that that is the true challenge for leaders and managers. How do we lift people? How do we encourage them to be the best that they can possibly be? And there's one other aspect of this little chart that wasn't shown in the original book, but to my mind, when you look at the green line and the red line, they're heading for a point there in the love zone. But what would happen if you were to extrapolate those lines a little bit? Just stretch them out. Just see what might happen. It could be that somebody comes in on the green line and within 20 minutes, they've gone up to the red line. They've actually increased their discretionary effort over and above what a normal new employee might give. And I can remember having exactly that experience. I went for a job interview once, and within 20 minutes of arriving at the company and being introduced to some of the people and seeing what they did, my discretionary effort had already gone up, and I really, really, really wanted that job. And if we can get people up into that area, then we're creating the real golden stars of our business. So there's the challenge of leadership. How do you lift your people from the red line to the green line? Let's have a look at those 4 myths of motivation, which might be holding you back. So these myths are about complaints, about key performance indicators, about financial rewards, and about the power of softness. I'll deal with these one at a time. So first of all, complaints. There seems to be a myth that customers only ever want to complain. Over this 27 years of running the WOW Awards, we've completely blown that out of the water. What we've learned is that customers have a tremendous propensity for wanting to say thank you. We just have to make it easy for them. And in effect, what I see is this little cartoon where complaints has a huge queue of people and maybe gratitude doesn't have anybody at it at all. But in reality, for most organisations, they have quite good complaints mechanisms, but it's as if the gratitude counter has actually been closed. I can't find any easy way of saying thank you. Now, if all you ever ask for are complaints, all you will ever get are complaints. Let's look at a couple of examples. Here's one of a hospital very close to where I live. Big modern reception area, very smart, very clean. But when I arrived, there's a huge sign advertising that this is where they deal with complaints. Given that patient recovery to a certain extent depends on the patient's confidence in the treatment that they are receiving, how damaging is it to have this big sign saying complaints? And like I say, customers are very enthusiastic. Don't try to combine customer feedback with market research. This isn't about was the lighting good, were the floors clean. Just simply ask your customers, have we done a great job for you? Make it easy for them, and they will tell you in their hundreds and thousands when they really appreciate what you're doing. So contrast that last hospital that advertises complaints with Hampshire Hospital. Posters around the wards and the patient areas advertising how they aspire to give great patient service and saying how you could make a nomination for the WOW Awards. And when I go into their colleagues' restroom, there are huge frames on the walls, a roll of honour for all of their employees who have been nominated for the WOW Awards, names, photographs and stories. And of course, all of that can flow through into things like your social media. So this isn't just about recognising your people and catching them doing things right and giving them pride in their work. It's also about building a brand reputation and promoting yourselves to new people who might want to work for an organisation that has that sort of ethos. So the second of these myths is around what I call key performance indicators. There's a saying I came across years ago that what we can measure, we can manage. But very often what I've seen in organisations is that perhaps we're measuring and targeting and motivating the wrong behaviours. Let me give you a simple example. How often have you been on the phone to a contact centre and the agent has cut off the call before your issue has been resolved? I just wonder whether that is happening because the agent is being targeted on an average call handling time. They get to that point where they don't want to exceed their target, and rather than resolve your problem and spend longer with you, they prefer to cut you off and then take you again as another incoming caller. And I see this sort of behaviour being repeated throughout organisations by people at all sorts of different levels. We're often focusing on the wrong indicators and motivating people to do the wrong things. Contrast that with what happened at Cadbury. Cadbury came back to us and said that we have now dropped All of our old KPIs in our contact center are now focused purely on customer nominations. Isn't that ultimately what you really want your organization to be known for giving great customer service? In which case, align everything towards that goal. It makes a significant difference. And then there's this question of rewards. We often talk about rewards and recognition in the same sentence. I think they are two completely separate things and ought to be spoken about separately. Reward is the contractual obligation related to your employment, how much you're going to be paid. Recognition is entirely separate and doesn't have to be financially based. Now, just bear in mind some research by Forbes that 65% of employees, nearly 2/3, would rather have a new boss than have a raise. As leaders and managers, I think there's a temptation to believe that our people are only motivated by money, and that really isn't the case. Most often, money is quite a secondary consideration. They've committed themselves to this particular job in return for an agreed rate of pay. They're not particularly looking for a financial incentive. And even in the case of salespeople, I always thought that perhaps salespeople were the ones who were most financially motivated. Incentives, bonuses, commissions, and the like. But look at this little survey result. This is from Austin Ben, recruitment consultants for salespeople, and they said that being respected was the single biggest motivator. But what really struck me with this particular quote is not the being respected bit, it's the fact that they said that this was the biggest single motivator in all respondents, not just 8 out of 10 or the majority, all respondents. How fascinating is that? And I'd like to share with you the work of Dan O'Reilly. Now, Dan has written this little book, excuse me, called Payoff. And what Dan has done is to carry out a careful study of different groups of people in the same working environment and to see what motivates them. And basically there were 4 groups. There was a control group, there was a group that were going to be given financial incentives, there was a group that was going to be given the incentive of pizza, and the 4th group was simply given a sincere thank you from the boss for doing a good job. Fabulous little book, relatively short read, really insightful, but pretty much summed up in just 2 sentences. He said this: unfortunately, there are many ways to kill trust and goodwill. The simplest is to pay people directly for their performance. Just think about it. Isn't that really what we're aiming for with our employees? To maintain trust and goodwill? Let me just repeat that. There are many ways to kill trust and goodwill. The simplest is to pay people directly for their performance. What they found was that the people who were given a financial incentive actually performed worse than the control group. The people that were given pizza as an incentive performed a little better short term, but then their performance dropped and was worse than the control group. It was only the group that were given sincere appreciation that actually consistently performed better than the control group. And a lot of our experience with the WOW Awards has been in organisations that don't have the flexibility to be able to offer bonuses and financial incentives. And yet, employee recognition seems to be even more effective in those organisations than in others that are more commercial. So the four myths, the final one is this one around softness. It seems to me in the corporate world that softness is generally regarded as a weakness. The first 20 years of my corporate life, rising up the corporate ladder, it felt like every one of my bosses was thumping the table, demanding that I meet certain deadlines, that I achieve certain targets, and threatening me with dismissal or demotion if I didn't achieve those targets. But that became very, very demotivating. Giving sincere appreciation, recognizing somebody's good efforts, might be seen as a weakness. But think of it this way, who's likely to perform better? The employee that's constantly being criticised, or the employee who's encouraged and motivated by us saying, you did a great job, this is what you did, this is what the customer appreciates, thank you, please can you do more of it? Just to read another little piece to you, this time from a book called This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. It's essentially the diary of a junior doctor working in the National Health Service. He said this, he said, all medics get to grips with the lack of promotion and financial incentives, but it's harder to accept the fact that it's rare to get a well done. The butlers at Buckingham Palace, under orders to float out of rooms backwards and never to make eye contact with the Queen, probably get more recognition. It didn't strike me for years until the fifth or sixth time I'd had my knuckles rapped for some trivial muck-up when a degree of human error had kicked in, that none of my consultants had ever taken me aside to say I was doing a good job, or that I'd made a smart management decision, saved a life, cleverly thought on my feet, or stayed at work late for the 30th consecutive shift without complaining. Nobody joins the NHS looking for plaudits or expecting a gold star or a biscuit every time they do a good job. But you'd think it might be basic psychology and common sense to occasionally acknowledge good behaviour to get the most out of your people. Patients tended to get it though. When one of them said thank you, you knew they meant it, even if it felt like it wasn't for anything special, just one of the smaller horrors thrown at you that day. I've kept every single card a patient has given me. These guys survived every house move, escaping even my cathartic clear out of medical paperwork once it was all over. They were little fist bumps that kept me going, rays of thoughtfulness from my patients that hit the spot when bosses couldn't or wouldn't oblige. I think in many organisations we're missing an opportunity. And where does this all stem from? Look at the beaming smile on little Thea here on receiving a certificate at her school. And isn't that how we motivate our children, with star charts and merit badges? Beaming with pride. And that psychology is so deeply embedded in us as children that we feel that same sense of pride as adults. And just look at this group here, being presented with WOW Award certificates from their chief executive. The lady in the grey jumper there said to us this. She said that receiving this award after 33 years dedicated service made it all worthwhile. Now, on one hand, I'm incredibly proud that we were able to give Debbie that recognition. But at the same time, I feel incredibly saddened that perhaps for 33 years she hadn't felt appreciated. Are we really giving our people the appreciation they deserve? Are we encouraging them to be the best that they can be? Are we thinking because we can't give a financial incentive that we can't say thank you? Maya Angelou perhaps summed it up best. She said, "People will forget what you said and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Let's make our people feel like superstars. Let's catch them doing things right. Let's encourage them to do more of it. And let's dismiss these four myths of motivation. So, my background's actually in finance, and I worked for 20 years in the manufacturing sector. And whenever I'm looking at an investment or a project that might help the business that I'm working with, I want to do the numbers. I want to really think about, will I get a return on this investment? So one of the things that I started thinking about was this question: is there a diminishing power of employee recognition? Like, if you congratulate somebody once for doing a good job, hopefully that's going to lift their spirit, give them pride, and encourage them to do more. If you give them a second piece of recognition, is it worth a little bit less? Does the power of that recognition diminish with the amount that's given? So here I've just given you a very simple chart that again looks at how much discretionary effort people are giving, but compares that with how much recognition they're receiving. And I wondered whether there was a sliding scale, like as we give more recognition, is that discretionary effort starting to drop away? Now, I never really expected anybody to be nominated for the WOW Awards more than once, so I was surprised when somebody was nominated twice. I was even more surprised when one lady was nominated for the 7th time. And I arranged to sit with her at dinner one evening, and I said to her, "Diane, could you just tell me, please, does the 7th WOW Award that you've received from us mean less to you? Is it less significant in some way than the first certificate that you had from us?" And she took hold of my arm and she said, "Derek, you don't understand." And I thought, what don't I understand? She said to me, "Derek, my family are buying me a new sideboard for Christmas, and that is so that I can display all of my certificates." Now, over the years, the number of nominations we've had, we now have people who have received not just 7 or 10s of nominations, but hundreds of nominations, and some people who are now having received over 1,000 customer nominations. So it doesn't seem like there's a sliding scale. I did wonder whether maybe there was a step function. Do people receive nominations up to a certain point and then their discretionary effort starts to drop away? But it doesn't seem like that is true either. It really does genuinely seem like the impact of recognition is almost instant. People can go from a very low level of discretionary effort to a very high level of effort really, really quickly, and it stays there. And like I say, we now have some people who have been recognised for their efforts more than 1,000 times by their customers. So rather than talking about the diminishing power of recognition, I think I'd much rather refer to the undiminishing power of recognition. And as a business, what sort of impact does this have? Morrison Water Services have told us that their employee recognition program has helped them increase their customer satisfaction quite significantly. Based on that and what's now referred to as their sterling performance, some of their customers have extended contracts. They've seen a 6% reduction in their employee turnover rate. Now, very often, employee turnover and sickness or absence are almost regarded as fixed overheads. They're budgeted for each year, perhaps with a small allowance for inflation. It's just assumed that those are going to continue at the present level. But what would the impact be on your bottom line if you could achieve a 6% reduction in employee turnover? That's less recruitment cost and less training cost. If you can reduce employee absence and sickness, that's less cost for you as well, all of which can have a significant impact on the bottom line. They also reported their best ever employment engagement results in their survey, 78%. And they got some fabulous, fabulous stories. I genuinely believe that an organisation is only as good as the stories that it can tell. And if an organisation can talk about how one of their people saved a customer's life, that's a pretty powerful story. One other thing that I've learned that's really fascinated me is there seems to be a correlation between compliments going up and complaints declining. Morrison Water Services have reported this very strong correlation, and one of our other clients has seen a massive reduction in the number of complaints they receive as the number of compliments increased. In fact, they reduced their complaints by 80%, and it was a big number. So that really is a significant improvement in their business performance. So you're wanting to make your recognition program the best it can possibly be. Let's look at 10 top tips just for helping you to achieve that based on our experience. The first is all around fairness and transparency. Then we've got buy-in, we've got frequency, making it specific and so on. And I'll just run through these and give you an outline for each of them. So bear in mind that a huge proportion of people don't trust their boss to tell the truth. So any program that you implement has to be seen as being fair and being transparent. I really don't think I need to drive this message home too hard, but it needs to be unbiased, it needs to be credible, and it needs to be all-inclusive. So think about that right from the start. You really need management buy-in. Some research done by the authors of this book, Leading with Gratitude, found that 67% of managers believe that they give more than average recognition to their employees. Only 23% of employees feel that they receive sufficient recognition. So we need management buy-in, and I would recommend that it starts in the boardroom. If you can get your recognition program as a measure into your boardroom, and you can start keeping track of your progress, which are your best performing departments, who are your best performing people, start focusing on what you're doing right rather than what you're doing wrong, and it becomes really, really compelling. And of course, share those positive stories on your websites, through your social media, build your brand. Let people know that this is a fantastic place to be an employee. Frequency, making it specific and making it timely. It sounds very, very simple. Just think it through. Why not recognise people each day based on the feedback you've had the previous day? Ask customers to be specific. Make it timely. It's no good waiting till December to recognise something that was done in January. The sooner you can give them that recognition, the more impact it will have, and the higher up the chain of command it comes from, the more impact it will have. I'm a great believer that systems plus people equals consistency. So Map it out. What is going to be your process? How are you going to receive these nominations? How are you going to thank your customer? How are you going to let the employee know? How are you going to let their manager know? How are you going to recognize them? When is that going to happen? Who's going to coordinate all of this? It just needs thinking through from the start, because if you get it wrong in the first few weeks, the chances are it's going to crumble and you've just damaged that employee trust once again. So think it through. Values. How can you link this to your values? In a healthcare environment, it might be that you want to put patients and people first, or that respect is one of your values. Ask your customers when they're nominating somebody who's given them great service, how does that service relate to one of your core values? And the research indicates that if you can tie this recognition into your values, the impact is likely to be 71% better than an organisation that doesn't correlate that to their core values. So tremendous power there in saying, which of our values does this relate to? 360-degree, formal and informal. It doesn't have to be just customers saying when they've had great service. It could be peer to peer. It could be you nominating your manager or your chief executive. And it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't need a big award ceremony every year. You might be recognising people every day. But you could also have once a month tea and biscuits, or a nice end of year ceremony. Highlight the best of the best. Recognise milestones. What happens when somebody gets their 10th nomination? That's another opportunity to celebrate. And what I've realised over the years is that companies that celebrate success celebrate success. And then we come back to this question of action. Remember, I talked to you about RDN, rationalising doing nothing. Please do not suffer from RDN. Just take one idea from today and try and implement that and see what impact you have. I think you'll be really, really surprised at the positive results that you can achieve, and massive impact on the financial performance of your organisation. And none of what I'm talking about is terribly new. I think that the military have probably understood the power of recognition better than commercial organisations for hundreds of years. Just think about it. The military aren't able to give pay rises or bonuses. The Victoria Cross is something that's made from captured enemy cannons, from scrap metal. I came across this little quote from Napoleon over 200 years ago. He understood the power of recognition. He said this. He said, "My people will die for a ribbon. I cannot get my people to die for money." And therein lies the power. So what are your next steps? Well, for anybody watching live, I'll be delighted to take your questions, and I'll happily deal with questions and answers for as long as you would like to stay online. For those of you that aren't online, if you want to get in touch with me and put your questions to me, I'll happily deal with those too. If you'd like some recommended reading, I've referred to a number of books today and articles. If you'd like to know what those are, just email me with the word recommended and I'll send you over that little list. If you would like a workshop for your team or a keynote presentation, just let me know. I want to share our experience of making this really work. If you'd like to have a demonstration of the WOW Awards, this isn't a pitch for the WOW Awards, but if you'd like to know more about it, then please give me a call. And finally, make sure that you don't suffer from rationalising doing nothing. It's lovely to get great ideas, It's fabulous to go out and create a plan, but at the end of the day, only action really makes a difference. Thank you once again to the Good Business Charter for allowing me to be involved as a business, as a member of the Good Business Charter, but also to be able to share our experience and thoughts over this last 27 years with you. I hope it brings enormous value for you, your employees, your customers, and your business results. Thank you so much for being with me today. It has been a pleasure. Please do give me a call if I can be of any help. Thanks again.